Rain slicked the asphalt of the Harbor Mercy parking lot, turning every light into a smear. The hospital rose behind Lena Cole in a stack of pale windows and humming vents, a block of fluorescent white against the dark sky. Her badge had just clicked out for the night, but her body still felt wired, buzzing under the cheap navy jacket that did nothing against the wind. She tugged the zipper a little higher and stepped around a wide puddle that mirrored the emergency bay. Somewhere above on the roof, a helicopter blade cut the air in slow, heavy circles. She heard it before she saw it, a low chop that made the rain jump on the surface of the puddle. Her shoulders reacted before her brain did, pulling in tight. "Cole, you forget you live here or something?" The voice came from behind her. Mia, one of the senior nurses, stood under the awning, dry and smug, a to-go cup steaming in her hand. Lena half turned, just catching my breath. "Don't inhale too much disinfectant. Might grow a conscience." Mia laughed, tossed her empty cup into the trash, then waved toward the ER doors. "Good luck tomorrow night. Sloane's already in a mood." The automatic doors swallowed her. Lena stayed where she was, watching her reflection tremble in the puddle, until the rotor thump on the rooftop faded again into background noise. Her muscles unclenched one by one. She had been off for 6 minutes. Her body still thought she was in the shift. 8 hours earlier, Harbor Mercy Medical Center had been almost pretty from the outside. Late sunset over Harbor City turned the glass a soft rose, and the hospital logo, a stylized lighthouse, glowed against the sky. Inside, the illusion disappeared under the smell of bleach and coffee and anxious sweat. The ER had been full before she even clocked in. "Cole, you prepping beds or making friends with the time clock?" Dr. Patrick Sloane's voice carried across the nurse's station, that half-joking, half-cutting tone he seemed to reserve just for her. Lena tapped her badge, the screen blinking green, and walked over. "Room 6 is waiting on discharge. Labs for 12 still pending. I can float." Float. He repeated it like a curious word, then flipped through a chart without looking at her. His hair was too neat for an ER shift, not a single strand out of place. Right. Trainee status, no triage leads, no procedures without a direct order. You keep the sheets clean and the coffee flowing, we'll get along fine. He signed the chart with a sharp stroke. The pen squeaked. "Yes, Doctor," Lena said. It was easier to let the condescension slide over her than to push back. Sloane liked his audience. He liked conflict. He liked knowing everyone heard him. The monitors along the main corridor chimed and beeped in uneven harmony. A kid with a broken wrist cried in Bay 3, the high-thin sound piercing through the curtain. Someone laughed too loudly near the nurse's station. A news anchor murmured from a corner TV about traffic delays on I-5. Lena moved through it all almost silently. She adjusted the pillow under the boy's arm in Bay 3 without speaking, watched his breathing slow once his pain meds kicked in. His mother-mouthed "thank you" eyes still wet. Lena gave a little nod, then slipped out before Sloane could drift over and deliver some rehearsed reassurance about bone healing. In Bay 7, an elderly woman lay alone, lipstick-smeared hospital gown gaping at the back. The chart in the wall pocket said her name was Margaret Hensley, chest pain rule out MI. The monitor showed a neat tracing, but Lena noticed the furrow deep between the woman's brows, the way her fingers pressed against the sheet like she was bracing for something. "Too cold?" Lena asked. Margaret blinked. "I hate the noise." Lena smiled faintly. "I can't turn the whole hospital down, but I can fix this." She reached up and adjusted the lead on Margaret's chest so it sat more comfortably, then hit a button to lower the alarm volume on the bedside monitor. The beeping softened to a more distant metronome. "Better?" she asked. Margaret's hand loosened a little. "You're the quiet one. The others come in like a parade." "Guess I missed the rehearsal," Lena said. Out in the hall, Sloane's voice cut through the buzz. "Cole, what are you doing with 7?" he called. "She's stable. You're wasting time. Room 12 needs clean linens and nobody's going to do it for you." "Yes, doctor," Lena answered, stepping away from the bed. She glanced once more at the monitor. The numbers were technically fine, but something in the rhythm of Margaret's breathing stuck in her ear. She logged it to the back of her mind, a file she could not open yet. The shift went on. She cleaned blood off gurney rails, charted vitals, fetched coffee that never stayed hot long enough, held vomit bags at the right angle. At one point, Sloane started an argument with a resident over a CT order and used Lena as the silent example. "You see Nurse Cole here," he said, gesturing with his pen. "Knows her place. Doesn't barge into conversations she is not equipped to understand. You might try it." The resident's jaw tightened. Lena stared at a smudge on the floor, heat crawling up her neck. She did not correct the dose in Sloane's order, even though she saw the error. Another nurse caught it before the medication went through. In the break room under the hum of an old vending machine, she finally sat. The chair gave a tired creak beneath her. Someone had left a half-eaten donut on the table, frosting gone hard. Her stomach reminded her she had not eaten since midday. She opened her backpack instead. Inside, not a makeup bag or romance novel, but a stack of worn manuals. Field medicine, Austere surgery, trauma algorithms annotated in tight, neat handwriting. The edges of the pages were rounded from use, some corners flagged with yellow stickers. She flipped one open eyes running over a diagram of the chest ribs, numbered in black ink. Her fingertip rested over the fifth rib on the left side. Habit. She closed the book, slid it back into the pack. When the shift finally slowed, she stayed behind while the others trickled out. The floors team had not made it down yet, so Lena took a mop and cleared the worst of the blood from Bay 2. She wiped down the metal rails, arranged the instruments back on the tray in precise lines. It was not in her job description. Neither was leaving a room in chaos. Harbor Mercy. At this hour felt like a different building. The loud relatives had gone home. The TVs had been turned off. Only the steady beeping of the central monitors remained a softer, steadier heartbeat. She liked it this way. In the staff locker room, the air smelled of cheap deodorant and old scrubs. Metal doors banged open and shut as people changed and left their conversations bouncing off the tile. Big night, huh? Tell me about it. Sloan is impossible when administration is on his back. I heard the new nurse almost messed up meds. The chatter faded as each person left. Eventually, only Lena remained sitting on a bench in front of her locker, fingers working the combination without looking. The door swung open. Inside her world was compressed one extra set of scrubs, a folded hoodie, a photo of the harbor taped to the back wall, gray sky gulls frozen mid-flight. On the top shelf sat the canvas backpack, and beside it something small and dark. She picked it up. A fabric patch lay in her palm, edges frayed, letters dulled with time. Navy Combat Medical Response curved around the shape of a caduceus. The colors had bled a little blue into gold. Near the bottom, someone had stitched 3 tiny lines of thread in a different shade, almost invisible unless you knew where to look. Her thumb traced the curve of the lettering, then paused over those 3 lines. She closed her fingers around the patch until the corners bit into her palm. The hospital intercom crackled somewhere above the lockers, a voice announcing a visiting hours reminder. The sound barely registered. For a few seconds, there was only the soft rush of air through the vents and the muted beat of her own pulse. She slipped the patch into the inner pocket of her jacket. The weight was almost nothing, but she could feel it, a small, solid presence against her ribs. Lena shut the locker, turned off the light, and stepped out into the corridor toward the exit, shoes squeaking faintly on the polished floor. By the time she pushed through the last set of doors and felt the rain hit her face again, the rooftop helicopter had already come and gone. The sky over Harbor Mercy was empty and low, holding its silence close. She walked across the parking lot with her hands in her pockets, the patch pressing a familiar shape against her palm, the hospital shrinking behind her with every step. By the time Lena walked back into Harbor Mercy the next night, the rain had thinned into a mist that hung in the glow of the streetlights. The lighthouse logo over the main entrance shone like an eye watching everyone who stepped through. She wiped her shoes on the mat and felt the hospital air close around her again, cool and sharp with disinfectant. The badge at her hip beeped against the reader. Green light. Another night. The ER was already humming. A teenager in a soccer jersey sat on a gurney clutching his ankle. A man in a suit paced with a phone pressed to his ear, one hand on his chest, where a triage band marked him as low priority. Somewhere behind a curtain, someone coughed in hard, wet bursts that made the metal rings on the track rattle. At the nurse's station, Dr. Sloan stood with his back to her, leaning over a chart. Zoe Park, the young resident, hovered on the edge of his shoulder, trying to see. Lena slid in behind the counter and checked the assignment board. Her name appeared 3 times in small black letters: Triage, Assist, Float, Medication Support. Sloan looked up as if he had felt her, not seen her. Cole, you are on vitals and comfort measures tonight. He smiled, quick and humorless. Our liability department will sleep better that way. Zoe's eyes flicked toward Lena, then back to the labs on the screen. Yes, Dr. Lena said. The first hours blurred into tasks. Blood pressures, temperatures, blankets and basins. A crying toddler who refused to open his mouth for a throat swab until Lena knelt to his eye level and made the swab into a little game, a tiny spaceship that had to land and take off fast. The mother whispered thank you with a tired smile. In exam room 4, a middle-aged man in a button-down shirt and loosened tie sat on the bed, rubbing his arms through the thin gown. His chart read, suspected sinus infection, mild asthma, first time at Harbor Mercy. Julia, one of the day nurses who had stayed late, finished entering his intake data and handed the tablet to Lena. Room 4 just needs repeat vitals and a quick med recon, she said. He looks fine. Sloan wants to clear him. Lena stepped inside. Mr. Davenport, she asked.
He says?
He nodded a little too fast. Yeah, my wife insisted. Said I was wheezing. Lena listened to his lungs with her stethoscope cool metal against his back. The air moved in and out with a faint whistle on the right that did not match the chart's earlier note. His skin had a faint flush that did not look like a simple fever. Any allergies, she asked, checking the wristband and the meds list. Penicillin. I swell up like a balloon, he said, attempting a joke. They put that in the chart right. She glanced at the electronic record. Penicillin allergy, bright red, clearly marked. The medication list showed a new antibiotic order from Sloan, not in the penicillin family. Her eyes tracked down to the small print to the excipients, the sulfites. Something in her chest tightened. Have you ever had any reactions to other antibiotics, she asked. His fingers drummed on the bed rail. Once they gave me something in college, my lips got big for a bit, but it went away. Why? Before she could answer, Sloan appeared in the doorway, tablet in hand. Cole's still on vitals, he said. We are not opening a psychotherapy wing in here, Davenport. Good news, you are going home once we get this into you. He held up a small syringe, the liquid inside clear. Lena's gaze snapped to the label, then to the faint redness now creeping up Davenport's neck. Doctor, his face looks more flushed than earlier, she said. Maybe we should monitor a few more minutes before giving anything else. Sloan sighed, exaggerating the sound. Every patient in this place is flushed, Nurse Cole. It is an emergency room, not a spa. He snapped off the needle cap with a practiced twist. You are reading shadows. He injected the medication into the IV port with a flourish. Davenport smiled weakly, trying to be brave. See, Sloan said. No lightning, no swelling. Next time, trust the order set instead of your imagination. Lena stepped back, but she did not leave. She watched the man's throat as he swallowed the way his fingers gripped the sheet. 30 seconds. His breathing quickened. A minute. He brought a hand to his chest. Feels tight, he said, speech already a little thicker. Lena moved closer. Can you take a deep breath for me? He tried. The whistle in his lungs had turned into a harsh rasp. Red blotches were blooming under his skin, rising like islands on his neck and face. The monitor began to beep faster. Doctor, she said, voice flat. He is having a reaction. Sloan turned back annoyed. He just needs to relax. Panic can mimic a reaction. He went to adjust the oxygen flow, fingers fumbling at the dial. Davenport's next inhale caught halfway, his eyes going wide. His hand flew to his throat. The monitor alarm jumped from a polite chirp to a piercing tone. Lena pulled the crash cart closer with one hard yank. Mr. Davenport, look at me, she said, already reaching for the epinephrine. You are having trouble breathing. I'm going to help you. Cole, wait for my order, Sloan snapped, but his voice had lost its edge and gained something else. Something thin. She checked the label thumb on the dosage, confirmed the route on the protocol taped inside the cart door. No time to overthink, just the practiced flow of steps. Confirming EP intramuscular, she said aloud for the record. She jabbed the auto-injector into the outer thigh, counted off seconds under her breath, then withdrew and massaged the site. Zoe, call respiratory and bring the airway tray, she said without looking away from Davenport's face. Zoe moved at once. The world narrowed to the sound of Davenport's breath. It fought for space through tightening airways, a high whistle between his teeth. His lips were starting to pale. Stay with me, Lena murmured. She lifted his chin, feeling the stiffness in his neck, and watched his chest rise. In the next minute, the flesh under his skin began to fade. The rasp thinned, then softened. His shoulders lowered a fraction at a time. The monitor's frantic alarm dropped back into a regular beeping. Only then did Lena step away. Her palms were dry. She became aware of Sloan beside her, breathing a little harder than before. Lucky catch, he said after a moment. Lucky timing. Next time you still call for my confirmation before you stick anyone with anything. His tone had sharpened again now that the danger had passed. I took responsibility, Lena answered. That is the problem, Sloan said. Your license is not meant to carry that kind of weight. Do not repeat it. She looked like she might say something. Instead, she nodded. I am sorry, doctor, she said quietly. His shoulders loosened. The room relaxed around him. Hours later, during the lull between surges of patients, the ER lights seemed even harsher. The night staff moved slower, weighed down by coffee and fatigue. Lena sat at the small round table in the break room, back to the refrigerator manual open in front of her. Advanced airway management. The diagram showed cross-sections of neck and throat landmarks for cricothyrotomy mapped in simple lines. Her finger traced the placement of the incision again and again, skin membrane trachea. The memories came with it, uninvited but familiar. Dust in her teeth, heat pressing through body armor, a man's breath bubbling with blood until her hands made it stop, a far-off whoop of rotors growing louder over a desert sky. She blinked and the fluorescent light returned. The hum of the vending machine, the tick of the clock. Zoe pushed the door open with her shoulder, holding a chart and a cup of tea. Sorry, Zoe said. Did not mean to interrupt your study session. Lena closed the manual halfway. Just staying ready. Zoe hesitated, then sat across from her. I saw what you did with Davenport, she said. Sloan will never say it, but that could have gone bad fast. It did go bad, Lena said. We just got ahead of it. Zoe wrapped both hands around her cup. You ever think of going for advanced practice? She asked. NPPA, something like that. Lena's gaze dropped to the leafed edges of the manual. I had my fill of more responsibility, she said. This is enough. Zoe studied her for a moment as if she could see the outline of a different life hovering behind Lena's words. Then the overhead pager called Zoe's name and she left tea forgotten on the table. The call that changed the shift came an hour before dawn. 3 sets of sirens converged on Harbor Mercy, at once red and blue lights strobing against the glass doors. The radio crackled with words that never sounded calm: multi-vehicle collision, unknown number of injuries, possible ejections. The bays filled. A teenager with a broken jaw, blood dried in a fan over his cheek. A woman in her 50s chest, crushed against a steering wheel, struggling for each breath. A man in his 30s, no obvious wound skin already going gray around the edges. Everyone listen up, Sloan shouted over the noise. We prioritize airway breathing circulation like the posters say. Cole, stay back and support. Do not take lead on anyone. I want eyes on me at all times. All. He moved from bed to bed with orders that overlapped, voice rising. Nurses and techs rushed to obey lines, tangling machines crowding the space. Lena heard only one sound clearly. The third patient, the gray-faced man, lay with his head tilted at an awkward angle. His lips parted without sound. The chest movement was shallow, barely there. The nurse at his bedside fumbled with the oxygen mask, hands shaking. Doctor, his sats are dropping, she called, staring at the monitor where the numbers slid lower. I am coming, Sloan said, already at the chest trauma in the next bay, attempting an intubation on a patient who fought his every move. Lena stepped toward the gray man. Cole, I told you to stay clear, Sloan snapped without looking back. She stopped at the foot of the bed. The man's eyes rolled, showing mostly white. The hollow at the base of his throat tugged in and out in sharp, desperate pulls. Jaw thrust is not enough, Lena said. He is losing his airway. We will tube him when I get there, Sloan answered. Too many fires at once. Support him and wait. The nurse by the bed tried to hold the head steady, but her fingers trembled more. Lena moved to the opposite side and put one hand on the man's sternum. She felt the flutter of his heart under her palm, too fast and too thin. There was a moment where the noise of the room pulled away from her. She heard the wet sound of his breath, the long pause between inhales, the alarm starting its steady rise. Her hand let go. She reached for the airway tray. Record that I am initiating an emergency cricothyrotomy, she said. Her voice was calm, carrying just enough to be heard over the chaos. The nurse blinked. Are you allowed to do that? He is not allowed to die while we wait, Lena said. She palpated the neck quickly, fingers finding the slight soft spot just below the Adam's apple, the cricothyroid membrane. The skin felt cooler there, stretched thin. She cleaned the site in a swift circle, then took the scalpel. One clean incision. Blood welled, then less than she expected, a dark line instead of a flood. She pressed and spread, guiding the small tracheostomy tube into place with practiced precision. The first rush of air through the tube felt like a miniature wind against her gloves. Bag him, she said. The nurse attached the bag valve mask and squeezed. The chest rose more easily. The monitor alarm paused, then shifted back to its repetitive beep. By the time Sloan turned around, the gray had left the man's skin. Color faint but real crept back into his cheeks. Sloan stared at the tube at the base of the neck, then at Lena. You did not have authorization, he said. He did not have time to wait for it, she replied. The charge nurse stepped in, voice brisk. Vitals are stabilizing, she said. He was crashing. Sloan opened his mouth, closed it, then latched onto the one thing he could control. His chart is not updated with that procedure, he said. The consent forms are not adjusted, and you did not re-verify his identity before cutting. The paperwork on this is going to be a nightmare. Lena looked at the man on the bed, at the slow, even rise of his chest. I will fill out what I can, she said. When the last of the crash victims had been sent upstairs or discharged, the ER sagged into a tired quiet. No one said thank you. No one said much of anything. The wail of the sirens outside had faded, leaving only the hum of the vents. Lena stayed behind again. She wiped dried blood off the bed rails, lined up the instruments until they sat in perfect rows, checked the suction canisters, changed the sheets. The room smelled metallic and sour until she finished the last corner and sprayed the disinfectant. Her hands moved on their own, remembering other rooms, other nights. She stood in the center of the trauma bay for a moment, fingers flexing as if the memory of the scalpel still sat between them. Then she turned out the lights and walked back through the quiet hallway toward the locker room, the echo of the monitors following her like a distant, steady pulse. The locker room smelled of detergent and steam. A dryer thumped somewhere behind the wall, slow and steady. Lena turned the dial on her locker by habit numbers under her fingers without thought. The door swung open. Scrubs folded in a neat stack, the harbor photo, the backpack, on the top shelf the patch. She took it down and sat on the bench. The metal was cold through her thin pants. For a long moment she did nothing except look at the fabric in her hand. Navy Combat Medical Response. The letters curved around the faded emblem. Her thumb brushed over the 3 tiny stitches at the bottom that were not part of the original design thread, just a shade off from the rest. She closed her eyes. For a heartbeat, the locker room shifted. Heat pressed in on all sides, the air thick with dust and smoke. Someone shouted for a medic, rotors distant and growing. The fluorescent light buzzed above her. She opened her eyes, slipped the patch into her jacket pocket, and stood. The metal bench creaked as she pushed away from it. Her reflection in the small mirror by the door looked like any other night shift nurse. Hair pulled back, dark circles, a generic badge with a generic title. The weight inside her pocket did not show. She flicked off the light and stepped into the corridor. Harbor Mercy at this hour had a hollow quiet, as if the building were catching its breath between waves. The overhead lights were dimmed to save power. A floor buffer hummed somewhere on another level, low and distant. She walked past the nurse's station. Zoe was there, hunched over a computer, charting, her eyes grainy with fatigue. Heading out, Zoe asked, without looking up from the screen. For a few hours at least, Lena said. Zoe smiled without humor. Get some sleep for both of us. Lena nodded and kept going. The automatic doors at the ER entrance slid open at her approach, letting in a breath of cool, damp air. The mist had thickened again, softening the edges of the parking lot lights. She stepped outside. The first thing she felt was the wind. It hit her like a wall, a hard gust that drove the mist sideways. Her hair lifted at her temples. The fabric of her jacket snapped against her sides. The air carried a sharp scent of fuel that did not belong to any car in the lot. The second thing she noticed was the sound. Not the dull thrum of the rooftop life flight helicopter she was used to, but a deeper chop that seemed to reach into the pavement and shake it. The puddles on the asphalt jumped in tiny rings. The glass in the windows hummed. She squinted against the sudden brightness as a white beam cut through the mist and pinned the front drive in harsh light. Debris skittered across the pavement, paper cups, leaves a plastic bag twisting like a trapped thing. A helicopter descended into view, much larger than the ones that usually made rooftop runs. The rotors spun so fast, they blurred a disk of shadow above the hulking body. The fuselage was matte, a dark shape with no hospital logo. Only a faint stencil near the tail she could not read from where she stood. It was coming down in the ambulance bay. Jesus, someone behind her said. The night security guard Jorge had stepped out from his desk, one hand on the doorframe to steady himself against the wash of air. His uniform jacket flapped, trapped between the wind and the door. Life flight does not land there, he muttered, eyes wide. Lena did not answer. Her heart had picked up in a way that had nothing to do with stairs or adrenaline. The wind smelled exactly like she remembered. Heated metal, kerosene, dust teased up from concrete. The helicopter settled with a violent bounce that sent another blast of air across the front of the building. A cone of light swept the facade, then locked onto the main doors. The rotors kept spinning loud and insistent. The side door slid open. Figures emerged, silhouettes for a second against the glare, then resolving into men in dark gear helmets under their arms, weapons slung tight against their bodies. Their movements were quick and economical, not rushed, but urgent. The one in front wore no helmet. His hair was cut close to his scalp, his jaw shadowed. He spoke into a headset clipped to his collar, mouth moving fast, words lost under the roar as he jogged toward the entrance. Hey, you cannot park that thing there, Jorge shouted, but his voice broke apart in the air. The man did not slow. He reached the sliding doors and they opened almost reluctantly, pushing against the wind from the rotors. He stepped inside, bringing the smell of fuel and sand with him. His gaze swept the lobby, once sharp and assessing. A few people in the waiting area sat up straighter, eyes wide. A child started to cry. We need emergency medical support, he called, voice cutting through the chaos. We are looking for Lieutenant Commander Lena Cole. Her name fell into the room like something physical. Conversation stopped. A receptionist's hand froze over a keyboard. A man with a bandaged hand looked up from his phone. Jorge turned toward her so fast his radio swung out from his belt and hit his hip. Lena, he said, they talking about you? She just stared at the man in tactical gear. For a moment, all she could see was the patch in her pocket, the letters she had just touched. Lieutenant Commander. The title hung over the nurse's badge on her chest, the cheap plastic suddenly too bright. The man in gear saw where Jorge was looking. His eyes found Lena and held. Something in his stance changed. It was small, a straightening of shoulders, a shift of weight, but the respect in it was unmistakable. He walked toward her, each step sure on the slick floor. Ma'am, he said when he was close enough. Commander Nate Riker, Naval Special Warfare. We need you to come with us. Now. Lena took a step back. You have the wrong person, she said. Her voice felt strange in her own ears, too quiet against the rotor thunder. I am Lena Cole, but I am a nurse here. You are Lieutenant Commander Lena Cole, formerly of Valkyrie 6, attached to Ghost 9, he said, every word precise. You served as lead combat medic. You are the one we need. The names brought with them a rush of images, a unit patch on a different uniform, faces in the dim light of a transport plane, sand blowing in through a torn flap. Her back hit the reception counter. She had not realized she was moving until the hard edge stopped her. "I do not do that anymore," she said. Behind Riker, 2 more operators stepped in from the doorway, their eyes adjusting to the interior light. One of them scanned the room, his gaze passing briefly over the framed photo of Harbor Mercy's board of directors, over the vending machines, over Jorge, then returning to Lena. Riker lowered his voice a notch, but not enough that she could pretend she had misheard. "Captain Elias Ward is in critical condition at our forward base," he said. "Multiple internal injuries from an improvised device, suspected thoracic involvement. The base surgeon cannot locate the bleed. They are losing him." The name hit harder than the wind. Elias. For a second, the hospital lobby fought with another place. A night beige tent lit from within. A man with blood on his teeth making a joke through a grimace. A hand grabbing her vest and pulling her down as something screamed overhead. "You are sure?" she said, because the alternative was to admit how her hands had started to shake. Riker nodded once. "He asked for you by name and rank," Riker said. He said, quote, "She is the only one who knows where the other scar is." Her mind flicked to the manual she had studied in the break room, to the 5th rib on the left side she had traced while fluorescent lights hummed overhead. "5th rib, left lateral margin," Riker said, unaware of the way his words matched the picture in her head. "Older injury, scar tissue. He said the new damage sits right on it. He said you have had your hands there before. He trusts you know the terrain." Her fingers closed tighter around the inside of her pocket, pressing the patch into the fabric. The rotor beat pressed against the glass behind Riker in relentless waves. It filled the silence between them. The ER door slammed open again. Sloan strode in lab coat, flaring eyes narrowed against the light. "What is going on out here?" he demanded. "You cannot just land military aircraft in my ambulance bay without clearance." Riker turned his head slightly, taking in the white coat, the stethoscope, the annoyed face. "This is not your ambulance bay tonight," he said. "It is our extraction point." Sloan's gaze snapped to Lena. "And of course you're in the middle of it," he said. "Whatever this is, she is not your best option. She is a mid-level nurse. She barely stays within protocol as it is." Jorge shifted uncomfortably at the desk. A couple in the waiting area glanced at each other, uncertain. Riker faced Sloan fully now. "Doctor, with respect, Lieutenant Commander Cole designed triage procedures your own military hospitals use," he said. "She has treated more battlefield trauma than most surgeons see in a lifetime. That is why we are here." Sloan scoffed. "If that were true, she would not be cleaning beds in my ER," he said. "If you take her and something happens, this institution will not be held liable. She is not cleared for independent decision-making." Lena felt her face heat, not from shame, but from the collision of 2 worlds that had never meant to touch. She looked from Sloan's pinched expression to Riker's steady eyes. Riker's jaw flexed. "Liability is not my concern," he said. "Keeping my commanding officer breathing is." His gaze returned to Lena. "This is not a request born of convenience," he said. "We are out of options there. He is out of time. He refused to be loaded on a bird without knowing we were coming for you." The room seemed smaller. The fluorescent lights grew harsh around the edges. Lena heard the soft rustle of people shifting in their chairs, the click of a keyboard, the distant ding of an arriving elevator. All of it rested under the heavy drum of the rotors outside. She thought of Elias's handwriting on a scrap of paper years ago, tacked into the front of a field manual. "You think faster than the rest of us." Her hand came out of her pocket. The imprint of the patch lingered in her palm, faint lines pressed into skin. "I am not a surgeon," she said. "You have people whose whole job is to do what you are asking." Riker inclined his head slightly, acknowledging the truth without stepping away from it. "We have a base surgeon who cannot see what you have already seen once," he said. "He has tools. You have the map." "Ward understands that, and so do I." Behind them, the helicopter's searchlight shifted, sweeping across the windows. The beam caught in the hospital's glass front and reflected, turning the lobby into a cube of glare and moving shadow. Sloan shook his head. "This is absurd," he said. "If she walks out that door and something goes wrong here, that is on her. On all of you." Lena looked at the faces in the waiting room. A tired mother with a sleeping child. An old man with a cane, his foot tapping. Zoe, who had drifted closer to the doorway, eyes fixed on Lena, not on Sloan. Then she looked at the doors, still shuddering slightly with each beat of the rotors. Her heart had already chosen, her mind caught up. "Get me on a line with your medic," she said to Riker. Her voice was steady now. "I want his vitals labs, what imaging you have, and a list of everything they have pushed in the last 2 hours. Riker exhaled a brief release she almost did not see. "Yes, ma'am," he said. "We have comms in the bird." Lena turned to Sloan. "I will sign whatever you need," she said. "You do not have to cover me." His mouth tightened. "You do not know what you are walking into." She thought of sand and metal and a sky split by sound. of 3 lines of thread in a different color. "I have an idea," she said. She walked past him, past Jorge, who stepped aside so fast, his chair rolled back and hit the counter. The blast of night air hit her full in the face as the doors opened. The wind tugged at her jacket, at her hair, at the edges of the life she had tried to carve out between these walls. The operators parted for her, automatically giving her a clear path to the helicopter. She could feel their eyes on her, not measuring, not doubting, accepting. As she neared the bird, the noise grew into a physical thing in her chest. The searchlight pulled away from the building and angled down, bathing the concrete in white. She placed one hand on the side of the helicopter to steady herself as she climbed in. The metal vibrated under her palm, alive with power. Inside the cabin, a headset waited on an empty seat. Riker followed her up, already speaking into his own microphone, requesting the patch through to the field hospital. Lena sat buckled in and pulled the headset on. The padding sealed around her ears, muting the outside roar and replacing it with the crackle of radio channels and the steady breathing of the crew. Her fingers found the patch in her pocket again, pressing it flat against her ribs. The engine pitch shifted as the pilot increased power. The helicopter lifted off the ground, the hospital dropping away beneath them, its windows a grid of yellow squares in the dark. The city shrank into a scatter of lights as the helicopter climbed. Harbor Mercy became a small, bright rectangle among others, then folded into the dark. The rotors beat against the night, steady and relentless. Inside the cabin, red lights threw everything into bruised shadows. Riker handed Lena a tablet, wrapped in a rubber case, its screen already glowing with data. "Forward surgical team is patched through," he said into her headset. "You are on with Falcon Base. Major Brooks has point." Static crackled, then a clipped voice came through. "Falcon receiving. This is Major Calvin Brooks. Who am I talking to?" "Lieutenant Commander Lena Cole," she answered. The old rank came out of her mouth, clean and familiar. "Send me Captain Ward's vitals and recent labs. Describe the mechanism of injury and what interventions you have already done." There was a pause. The attached file blinked onto the tablet. Heart rate too fast. Blood pressure slipping despite fluids. Oxygen saturation drifting low. Imaging snapshots, grainy and gray, showed a blurred mass in the left chest cavity shadows where air should be. "IED blast during vehicle patrol," Brooks said. "Primary shrapnel to the side, secondary blunt trauma. He lost consciousness on scene, regained it in transport, lost it again on my table. I have placed a chest tube, given blood products and pressors. There is ongoing loss I cannot localize. We do not have CT capability at this location." Lena scanned the notes with quick eyes. "Entry wounds," she asked. "Left lateral chest around the 5th rib margin area," he said. "Previous injury there, some scar tissue." He had not disclosed the details. "The anatomy is distorted." Her thumb tightened on the edge of the tablet. "When was his last unit deployment before this?" she asked. "You could ask him yourself if you get here in time," Brooks said. The words tried for dry humor, but the strain under them was clear. "ETA on your bird." Riker held up 3 gloved fingers, then folded one down. 12 minutes, Lena said. "Keep him on current pressor dose. Do not chase the pressure with fluid alone, you will dilute what he has left. Prepare for a limited thoracic approach at the previous scar site. I will explain when I arrive." "You intend to operate?" Brooks asked. Surprise sharpened his tone. "You are a medic, not a surgeon." "I intend to keep him alive," Lena said. "Prep a sterile field, clamps, vascular sutures, and every assistant you can spare. I need warm saline and a functioning suction. We will use your hands and my map." Another short silence answered her, then a curt "copy" before the channel crackled and shifted. She passed the tablet back to Riker. "Tell the pilot we need a landing as close to the surgical tent as he can safely manage," she said. "I want Ward on our table in under 2 minutes from skids on the ground." "You got it," Riker said. He leaned forward, tapped the pilot's shoulder, spoke into his radio. The pilot answered with a small wave and adjusted his controls. The pitch of the engine climbed. Lena checked the field pack on the seat next to her fingers, moving quickly through compartments. Headlamp, sterile gloves in sizes that might fit, extra hemostats, a compact chest retractor, the kind she had once argued for in a meeting far from any battlefield. She lined them up in her head, the order she would need them. Her hands were steady. The patch in her inner pocket warmed against her chest, pressed firmly by the harness strap. Through the small round window, the darkness began to change. A pale smudge rose on the horizon, then resolved into the low, jagged shapes of tents and HESCO barriers. A single tall antenna blinked with a red light. Closer, small points of white marked vehicles and pathway lamps. The helicopter banked. The base swung into full view in one slow turn, the landing zone, a rectangle of dirt scarred by previous touchdowns. "Falcon Base, this is inbound medevac," the pilot said over the channel. "We are on final approach." Lights flared at the edge of the zone. Figures ran their movement tight and contained inside circles of illumination. Dust lifted in swirls as the rotor wash hit it, wrapping the approach in a shifting brown haze. The helicopter descended hard skids, striking the ground with a jolt that ran up Lena's spine. The cabin shook. Riker's hand braced the wall automatically. "Doors," the crew chief called. They slid open. Heat and smell rushed in hot sand and fuel, and something metallic underneath. The noise poured back around the edges of Lena's headset as she unclipped her harness and stood. Outside, the chaos was organized rather than frantic. A team in fatigues waited with a stretcher, the figure on it strapped down, blankets tucked tight. The monitor strapped to the frame showed a thin green line, a set of numbers that meant just barely enough. As Lena stepped down, the men at the stretcher shifted to make a path for her almost reflexively. It was the same parting she had seen in the hospital lobby, but here it carried a different weight. She walked through it without hesitation. The surgical tent stood 20 yards away, a pale shape under portable floodlights. Light seeped out around the flaps where they did not quite meet. Voices carried from inside the clipped language of people used to moving under pressure. "On my count," one of the medics at the stretcher said. 1, 2, 3. They lifted and moved. The stretcher rolled fast over the packed earth wheels, clattering over seams in the matting. Lena jogged alongside, her hand on the metal frame to keep in step. She looked down. Elias Ward looked smaller, lying flat. The lines of authority she remembered from his posture were gone, softened by weakness and sedation. His skin was the dry pale of someone who had bled more than a body should. Tubes snaked from his chest, taped in place over dressings that had soaked through and been replaced more than once. His eyes were closed. "Elias," she said, leaning close as they pushed into the tent. "It is Lena. I am here." One eyelid twitched. Then he dragged it open just enough for her to see the blue beneath. "Took you long enough," he breathed, the words barely air. His lips cracked when he tried to smile. It was an old joke between them. She gave him the answer they both knew. "Traffic," she said. "Fire me a complaint later." They wheeled him onto the central table. Overhead, bright surgical lamps flooded the space with stark white. Heat radiated from their bulbs. The air inside the tent was warmer than outside, thick with anticipation and disinfectant. "Step back, please," a voice said sharply. A man in scrub sleeves, rolled mask hanging loose around his neck, pushed between the medics. His hair was flattened with sweat, his eyes red from lack of sleep and strain. The rank on his chest read Brooks. "I am Major Calvin Brooks," he said. "I have this under control." Lena looked at the soaked dressings on Elias's side, at the suction canister that showed more red than she wanted to see, at the numbers on the monitor doing a slow, stubborn slide downward. "If you had this under control, I would not be here," she said calmly. Brooks bristled. "I do not need some imported consultant second-guessing my call," he said. "You can observe. You do not touch my patient." Riker stepped closer, but Lena lifted a hand slightly. She moved towards side, put her fingers gently against his neck, feeling the thread of his pulse. Her other hand rested on his rib cage, just above the tape that marked the edge of the previous scar. Through glove and gauze, she could still sense the subtle ridge of old healing, the way the tissue gave differently under pressure. She spoke without taking her eyes off the monitor. "You placed a tube at the standard mid-axillary line," she said. "You got air and blood." The lung re-expanded partially. The pressure stabilized for a time, then dropped again. "Your imaging shows a collection low and deep near the diaphragm, close to the previous injury, where your standard approach does not reach." Brooks blinked. "You read that from one chest film and a few vitals." "I read it from him," she replied. "And yes, from your film." He folded his arms. "Even if you are right, you are not on my credentialing list," he said. "You do not cut in my tent." Major Riker said quietly, "If we argue much longer, you will not have a patient to protect your tent from." Elias's hand twitched under the blankets. Lena watched the movement. "Lena," he whispered. Her name was barely a breath. "You remember. 5 ribs down. Left. You said it would hold." "It did," she said. "You just found a way to get yourself hurt on top of it." His mouth moved as if he wanted to laugh. The monitor line flickered. She looked up at Brooks, meeting his eyes. "I put that scar there," she said. "Under fire. With less light than this and fewer tools. I know where the repair is thin and where it is strong. If you open him wide the way they taught you, you will tear through it all and he will bleed faster than you can clamp." The tent seemed to tighten around them. The assistants shifted their hands, hovering over trays, uncertain which way to lean. Brooks swallowed. Sweat trickled from his temple down the side of his face. "What are you proposing?" he asked at last. "A focused approach between the 5th and 6th ribs at the existing scar minimal extension," she said. "You work through scar tissue instead of fighting new planes. Limited exposure, just enough to locate and control the bleeding at the intercostal level in any nearby vessels. You will need extra suction and precise retraction. I will guide you, or you let me take primary and you assist." You are asking me to let a medic do a thoracotomy on my table, he said. I am telling you, your surgeon's ego is a luxury he cannot afford, she said. She did not raise her voice. She did not need to. Riker watched Brooks with the same intensity he would give a target at range. Around them, the tent waited. Brooks exhaled through his teeth. You take primary, he said finally. I will drive suction and clamp. If this goes sideways, it is on both of us. That is the first reasonable thing you have said, Lena answered. Scrub in and listen. She moved to the small metal sink at the side of the tent, turned on the water, and scrubbed. The motions came back without thought, fingers dragging over palms, nails, wrists, up to the forearms. The soap smelled of hospital everywhere, cutting through the more specific sense of the base. Flashes of another tent layered over this one tan canvas instead of white, different faces turning toward her. Her hands were the constant. She dried gloved and stepped back to the table. An orderly helped her into a gown, tying the strings behind her neck with quick practiced movements. Field headlamp, she said. Riker handed it over. She settled the band around her head, pulled the strap until it sat snug at her temples. When she clicked it on the beam, pulled on the sheet in a tight circle of bright white. Clamp, she said. Brooks placed it in her palm. She peeled back the dressings, exposing the old scar that curved along Ward's side. The skin around it was red and warm, the swell of underlying damage visible even without a cut. Local, she said. They had already dosed sedation and analgesia. Ward did not move when the needle slid in at the edge of the scar. His chest rose in small, shallow breaths. She made the incision with the scalpel, following the line of the old scar, extending it only as much as she had to. The blade parted flesh with a thin resistance, then gave way. The smell of iron and sterile prep rose around them. Retractor, she said. Metal teeth met the edges of the wound, holding them apart. She worked through the dense, pale strands of scar tissue, cutting and spreading them with care, never more than she needed, minimal new trauma overrolled. All her focus narrowed into the space under her light. The rest of the tent faded to peripheral sound, the beep of the monitor, the hiss of oxygen, the soft suction noise as Brooks kept the field clear. There, she said softly. Deep in the wound, a dark well pulsed with each beat of Ward's heart hidden under a thin band of torn tissue. Each pulse sent a small slick of new blood into the cavity. Intercostal branch, she said. It is sheared just proximal to the repair. If you had gone from the standard axis, you would have opened half his chest before seeing it, Clamp Brooks said. Their hands moved together. He slid the instrument into the space. She opened his angle precise under her instruction. The jaws closed with a soft click around the vessel. The bleeding slowed, then stopped to a seep. The monitor line steadied. Good, she said. Now a tie. Her fingers worked the suture around the clamp, securing the vessel with careful knots. She did not rush. There were minutes again now, not seconds. They checked for other leaks, sweeping the field in a slow, thorough pattern. Nothing else spurted where it should not. Flush, she said. Warm saline rinsed the area, clearing leftover clots. The fluid ran clearer with each pass. Ward's blood pressure climbed, then leveled at a number that no longer looked like a countdown. Brooks let out a breath he had been holding. I see why he asked for you, he said. Close in layers, she answered. Follow the scar line. His body already built its defenses there. They closed together. Her stitches were small and even, bringing the edges of tissue together in a clean curve. When she finished the last knot, she cut the thread and stepped back. The headlamp beam no longer had a wound to illuminate. It slid across intact skin, shiny with antiseptic and new tension. Ward lay still, but his chest rose in deeper, more relaxed breaths. Color had returned to his face, faint but undeniable. Vitals are stabilizing, Major A. Medic said from the monitor. Heart rate coming down, pressure holding without further pressors. Brooks peeled off his gloves, hands shaking now that they were empty. You did not just keep him alive, he said, looking at her as if recalibrating everything he thought he knew. You did it through a scar. She slipped the headlamp off and placed it on the tray. Scar tissue is just a story your body tells about what it survived, she said. Sometimes you have to read it. She pulled off her gown, then her gloves, feeling the sweat cool on her forearms as air hit damp skin. Her fingers flexed once lonely without tools. Outside the tent, footsteps approached in a steady, ordered rhythm. The flap opened and a man in a tan uniform jacket stepped in. His rank tabs marked him as a colonel. Dust streaked the knees of his pants as if he had knelt on the ground not long before. Which one of you is Lieutenant Commander Cole? He asked. Lena turned. I am, she said. He looked at her face, then at the blood on her scrub top, then past her to the monitors that no longer screamed. I am Colonel James Mercer, commanding officer of this installation, he said. I was at the operations center the night Ghost 9 went dark. I saw the casualty reports. We were told no one walked out of that mess intact. Lena held his gaze. Some of us crawled, she said. Something flickered in Mercer's expression, respect tinged with regret. He turned to the tent at large. Everyone outside, he said. Front of the surgical unit. The staff exchanged glances but obeyed. Brooks hesitated only long enough to check Ward's monitors one more time, then followed. Riker fell in beside Lena as they stepped into the night. The air outside felt cooler than the tent, even with the generators still humming and the lights still burning. The smell of antiseptic gave way to dust and exhaust. Overhead, the sky stretched black and indifferent, pinpricked with stars the floodlights could not erase. In front of the tent, a loose circle of personnel had gathered, drawn by the word that something important was happening. Mercer walked to the center and faced them. His voice carried easily. "Attention," he called. The group snapped into formation, a cluster of broad shoulders and straight backs. Boots clicked together in near unison, a sharp sound on the packed earth. "Present arms," Mercer ordered. Every hand rose, fingers aligned, palms angled just so. A line of salutes pointed in one direction, at her. Lena did not move for a heartbeat. The sight hit her harder than any blast. She could feel Riker beside her, standing slightly behind his own hand at his brow. She swallowed, her spine straightened on his own. Then she lifted her right hand and returned the salute, the movement crisp and clean muscle memory reaching up from years she had tried to bury. The night held them there, a still frame of raised hands and white light and the faint steady beeping drifting from inside the tent. Only when Mercer lowered his arm did the others break position. Conversation started up again in low tones. People moved back to their stations. Riker looked at her, something like pride in his eyes. "Welcome back, Lieutenant Commander," he said. She let her hand fall to her side. The patch in her pocket sat warm against her ribs, its edges pressed into her skin as if staking a claim. The television in the Harbor Mercy staff lounge was usually background noise, a moving blur above the coffee machine. That morning, it was the only sound in the room. The anchor's voice carried over the clink of ceramic mugs and the soft hiss of the automatic espresso machine. Overnight, a Navy Special Operations Unit conducted an emergency medical extraction from a civilian hospital in Harbor City, she said. Witnesses report a military helicopter landing in the ambulance bay of Harbor Mercy Medical Center. The footage that followed was grainy, taken from a distance on a phone. The screen showed the dark shape of a helicopter rotor slicing the mist, the light from its nose washing over the hospital's glass. Tiny figures moved at its base. Under the screen, 3 nurses sat frozen. Julia held her cup without drinking. Mia's mouth hung open. In the far corner, Dr. Miriam Hayes, chief of surgery, leaned forward in her chair, eyes narrowed. The clip cut to a different angle, daylight now. A tan tent, a line of soldiers, a podium made from crates. Colonel Mercer stood behind a microphone, his jacket dusty, his voice clear. "Lieutenant Commander Lena Cole is a combat medic who exemplifies the highest standards of care under fire," he said. The caption at the bottom of the screen read, "Falcon Base Undisclosed Location." "When civilian systems failed to recognize her value, we almost lost one of our own." He gestured off camera. The view shifted again to the interior of a tent. Lena's face flashed on screen for a moment, turned 3/4 to the side. Headlamp on her brow, gloved hands working inside a wound that the camera did not show. The image held only a second before the editor cut away. In the lounge, Mia made a small noise. "No way," she said. "That is her." Julia set her cup down slowly. "Rewind that she told no one in particular." The anchor continued. "Military officials confirm that the patient Captain Elias Ward remains in stable condition after an emergency procedure performed by Lieutenant Commander Cole at a forward surgical facility," she said. The Navy has not clarified why Cole, currently employed as a night shift nurse at Harbor Mercy, was not identified in civilian records as an advanced practitioner. Dr. Hayes' jaw tightened. The next shot showed Colonel Mercer again speaking without notes. "We rely on protocols," he said. "We rely on systems. They help us save lives. But those systems are only as good as the people inside them and the courage they are allowed to show." He looked straight at the camera, then the broadcast cut back to the studio. The lounge went quiet except for the whisper of the espresso machine and the muted beep of someone's pager. Dr. Hayes stood. "Turn that up in the admin conference room," she said to Julia, "and pull every personnel file we have on Lena Cole." In his office upstairs, the hospital director was already doing that. Papers lay across his desk in uneven stacks, some half sliding to the floor. Lena's file sat open under his hand, thin compared to others, a bland list of positions and certifications. Registered nurse ER, trainee status extended, no prior hospital experience documented. On his computer monitor, the news clip replayed with the sound off. Colonel Mercer's mouth moved, his expression hard. The director clicked through internal emails, seeing Sloane's previous complaints about Lena, notes about boundary issues and failure to respect chain of command. The words looked different under the faint, paused image of a military salute. He rubbed his eyes, then picked up the phone. "Down in the ER?" The day shift arrived to a buzz of conversation. Jorge told the story 3 times before lunch, each version a little more detailed than the last. "They came in here with the helmets and all that," he said. gesturing broadly to a pair of respiratory therapists. Asked for her like she was a general. I thought maybe they were filming a movie. Then she just walked out with them, like it was nothing. Did you know, one of them asked, about her being Navy? He hesitated. I saw her cleaning up after everyone else, he said. I did not ask what she did before this. Maybe I should have. Near the nurse's station, Sloane flipped through charts with a stiffness in his shoulders that had nothing to do with sleep deprivation. Zoe watched him from the other side of the counter, the glow from the computer screen painting the planes of her face. You saw the news, she asked. He did not look up. News loves a story with a helicopter, he said. They do not care who fills out the incident reports afterward. Zoe's mouth pressed into a line. They said she saved a SEAL captain after he almost bled out, Zoe said. They said she was Ghost 9. Sloane's pen paused over a note. Ghost 9 is just a name, he said. Hospitals need policies, not ghost stories. He stabbed the page with a period harder than necessary. Late in the afternoon, the hospital's front doors slid open for a different kind of arrival. This time, there were no rotors, no flying debris, no floodlights. A black SUV pulled up to the curb. Another followed. Men stepped out not in full combat gear but in dress uniforms blue and pressed. The sunlight caught on their pins and nameplates. Captain Elias Ward walked between them. He moved carefully, each step deliberate, but he was upright. His uniform jacket hid the bandages on his side. The only sign of his injury was the pallor under his tan, and the way his breath shortened at the end of a sentence. People in the lobby straightened in their seats. A child tugged on his mother's sleeve, whispering. Elias scanned the reception desk. We are here to speak with the administration, he said, and to see Lieutenant Commander Cole. The receptionist blinked. She is not on the schedule, she said. One moment, I will call up. Before she could reach for the phone, Dr. Hayes appeared flanked by the director. They had watched the SUVs pull up from the second floor. Captain Ward, the director said, holding out a hand. I am Daniel Reeves, hospital director. We are very grateful you are well enough to travel. Elias shook his hand. I did not come for a checkup, he said. His attention drifted past Reeves to the cluster of staff gathering near the hallway. Sloane stood a little back from the group, white coat buttoned all the way, hands in his pockets. Where is Lieutenant Commander Cole? Elias asked. We are making every effort to contact her, Reeves said. She has not been scheduled back on shift yet. There was a brief pause. One of the SEALs beside Elias shifted his weight. We are not leaving until we thank her in person, Elias said. The statement hung in the air like a challenge. Word spread faster than any paging system. By the time Lena walked through the staff entrance at the side of the building, intending to clear out her locker before anyone could corner her, the lobby had become a quiet stage. She almost turned around when she saw the uniforms. Elias saw her first. Commander, he called, his voice carrying without a shout. Every head in the room turned. Nurses, techs, visitors. Sloane, Zoe. Jorge behind his desk. The group of SEALs straightened. As Lena stepped into the open space in front of the reception desk, they lifted their hands in a practiced simultaneous motion, palms tilted, fingers aligned, salute precise. In the fluorescent light of a civilian hospital lobby, the gesture looked almost unreal. Lena stopped. Elias came to stand in front of her, moving slower than he would have liked, but standing nonetheless. The lines of pain at the corners of his eyes deepened for a moment, then eased. You are hard to keep up with, he said quietly. You are a terrible patient, she answered. He smiled, then turned slightly so the rest of the room could hear. Everyone in this building needs to understand something, he said. The woman you called mid-level and trainee is the reason I am alive. Not just last week, but years ago when Ghost 9 should have been a list of names on a wall. A flush crept up Sloane's neck, his mouth parted then closed. Dr. Hayes folded her hands in front of her eyes on Lena. Dr. Zoe Park stepped forward, her voice low but steady. Ma'am, she said, I am sorry. For the way this place treated you. For the way I stayed quiet when I should have spoken. Lena looked at her. There was no accusation in her expression, only a tired understanding. Speak for yourself, Lena said. Not for the building. Buildings do not learn. Zoe swallowed. For myself then, she said. I watched you do things I am still training to handle. I let someone else tell me what that meant. It will not happen again. Lena nodded once. Then start by listening when the room is quiet, she said. Pain does not always arrive shouting. Her gaze moved to Sloane. He held it just barely. He cleared his throat. I misjudged you, he said. The words sounded like he had pulled them through a narrow space. I saw your silence and thought it meant you had nothing to say. You are not the first, Lena said. You will not be the last. Reeves stepped in, sensing the attention of the waiting room, the small red recording light on a phone someone had raised. We are conducting a full review of our credentialing and evaluation processes, he said. We will be establishing new guidelines that put patient outcomes at the center, informed by Lieutenant Commander Cole's expertise. The board has already approved the framework for what we are calling the Cole Protocol for Emergency Response. He said the name carefully, as if it might object. Lena's eyebrows lifted just slightly. You do not need my name on a form to do your job, she said. Maybe not, Reeves replied, but we need a reminder of what we almost threw away. In the corner, Jorge watched all of it with his hands folded on the desk. When Lena's eyes passed over him, he gave a small nod. You left your mop in Bay too, he said, attempting a joke. I figured someone else could handle it for a change, she said. A laugh scattered through the staff, thin but genuine. Elias shifted his weight, the effort costing him. We will not keep you, he said to Lena. I just needed to look you in the eye when I said thank you. You already did, she said, on the table. Not the same, he replied. They stood in a brief, comfortable silence. Somewhere down the hall, a monitor beeped twice, reminding everyone that the ER had not paused for this moment. Lena looked around one last time at the hospital lobby, at the chairs, the vending machine, the scuffed tile, at the faces that now watched her with something between respect and regret. Then she drew a quiet breath. I have papers to sign, she said, and a locker to empty. She turned toward the staff hallway. The seals stepped aside as she passed, forming a narrow path that led back into the part of Harbor Mercy that the public never saw. The staff hallway felt narrower than usual. The hum of the vents and the distant ring of phones floated in from the ER, muffled by cinder block walls. Lena walked past the bulletin board, where schedules and potlucks were pinned, the photos curling at the edges. In the locker room, everything looked the same. Damp scrubs and laundry bags, the lingering mix of detergent and old coffee, the metal bench where she had sat with the patch in her hand. Her locker opened with the small click she knew by heart. Inside, her life at Harbor Mercy fit into one armful. A folded hoodie, 2 sets of scrubs, the harbor photograph, the backpack with its hidden manuals. She stacked them neatly on the bench. Only when the locker was empty did she reach into her jacket and take out the patch. The fluorescent light caught on the frayed edges, the faded stitching. Navy Combat Medical Response curved around the emblem, the 3 odd threads at the bottom as visible to her as if they glowed. She held it up at arm's length and looked at it the way she might look at a wound she had closed years ago. Not to reopen it, simply to acknowledge it. Then she slid it into the inner pocket again. Outside, in a small office near administration, she signed where the HR representative pointed. The resignation form was printed on decent paper, her name in block letters at the top. As the pen moved, she felt the familiar tension of a signature, the motion that ended something, and whether she wanted it to or not, started something else. You have been an asset to this institution, the representative said, reciting training. We regret losing you. Lena left the pen on the desk. She did not linger. On her way out through the side door, she passed Zoe, who was hurrying toward the ER with a stack of charts. Leaving already? Zoe asked. For today, Lena said. Their eyes met. Zoe opened her mouth and shut it again as if the right words had not arrived yet. Good luck, she said finally. You too, Lena replied. She stepped outside into the harbor city air. The sky was a washed-out blue, thin clouds, stretched like smears of gauze. No helicopters, no flashing lights, just the quiet of a regular afternoon. She walked to her car with her bag on her shoulder and the patch warm against her ribs. A week passed. Harbor Mercy continued to function, its lights bright every night. The news cycle moved on to other stories. Somewhere inside the building, administrators argued over policies and language, and the best way to implement a protocol with her name attached. In Lena's small apartment near the harbor, the world narrowed to simpler things. The sound of gulls in the morning, the drip of her coffee maker, the way the light slid across the floor as the day turned. On a Tuesday, an envelope arrived that did not match the rest of the mail. Thicker paper, dark ink. The return address carried the crest of the Department of the Navy. It felt heavier than its size accounted for. She stood by the kitchen counter with the envelope in her hand for the length of one slow breath. Then she opened it. The letter inside was formal and precise. It listed her full name and rank, the record she had tried to bury under hospital schedules and trainee labels. It acknowledged her actions at Falcon Base and her previous service with Valkyrie 6 and Ghost 9. It extended an invitation. The Navy requested her return to active duty, immediate promotion to commander, an assignment as Director of Advanced Field Medical Doctrine and Training, with authority to design and implement new combat medical curricula across multiple commands. Her fingers traced the line that held that title. Director. The word felt odd on her tongue, but less so than it might have once. She imagined rows of trainees bright-eyed and restless, and somewhere in those rows someone whose hands might one day be steadier than hers had ever been. The patch in her pocket, the one she had slipped into her jeans when she changed out of scrubs for the last time, pressed against her hip when she shifted. She folded the letter back into the envelope, then unfolded it again and read it a second time. The decision did not stretch as long as the first one had. The choice had already taken shape in the way the words made her chest feel both heavier and lighter. 2 weeks later, she stood on a tarmac far from Harbor City. The air at the base was dry and clear. The sun sat low, a flat coin, behind thin clouds turning the horizon a muted gold. In the distance, a line of hangars cut the view. A single Black Hawk, painted in medical markings, rested near the edge of the runway, its rotors still, its windows reflecting the sky. Lena wore her dress uniform. The new silver of her commander bars caught the light when she moved. The fabric felt stiffer than the scrub she had lived in, but her shoulders fit into it as if they belonged there. Under the jacket sewn into the inner lining near her heart, the old patch lay hidden, surrounded by newer stitching. Footsteps approached from behind. She did not have to turn to recognize the rhythm. "You clean up well," Commander Elias said. She faced him. He wore his uniform too, the jacket tailored to hide the bulk of bandages, but his posture had regained more of its old authority. The pallor had given way to something closer to his usual color. His eyes were clearer. "Walking and talking," she said. "That is progress." "Breathing without an extra hole helps," he replied. They stood side by side for a moment, looking at the medical helicopter together. "They let you name it yet?" she asked. "Too many committees for that," he said. "They did change the inside the way you wanted. Compact retractors, better suction, space for people to move without tripping over themselves." She nodded, satisfied. "Someone listened," she said. "That is why you are here," he answered. They walked toward the low building near the runway where the briefing room waited. Inside, rows of chairs were filled with uniforms. Some shoulders carried medic patches, some did not yet. The air held a tension that was not quite nerves, not quite expectation, something in between. At the front of the room stood a simple podium. Beside it, a projection screen displayed a title slide. Brooks Doctrine. Someone had typed in large plain letters. Below it, smaller Advanced Field Medical Program. Lena resisted the urge to roll her eyes at the word doctrine. Names she knew were mostly for other people. She stepped up to the podium. The murmur in the room died down to silence. Dozens of faces turned toward her. She did not look at the slide again. "I am Commander Lena Cole," she said. The title settled into the room without echo. "Most of you know why you are here. Some of you think you do." A few smiles flickered, nervous and genuine. "You will learn techniques," she continued. "You will drill them until you can do them with your eyes closed, until your hands remember when your brain is busy with other things. You will memorize protocols and checklists. They are important. They keep you from making the same mistake twice." She let the words sit for a moment. "There will be nights when the room is loud," she said. "People shouting, machines screaming, your own pulse pounding in your ears. In those moments, you will not have time to debate whose job something is. You will have a patient and a problem. Your hands will move or they will not." She glanced toward the back of the room where Elias stood against the wall, one shoulder propped as if he did not yet trust his balance. "Conviction is not bravado," she said. "It is not volume. It is knowing as clearly as you know your own name that the life in front of you deserves your best decision, even if it goes against the safest option for your career." She did not mention Ghost 9. She did not mention Harbor Mercy. The details were in the files in the rumor network, in the way some of the students watched her like they had watched the news. "You will hesitate," she said. "That is human. You will feel fear. That is human too. The only thing that is not acceptable is letting that fear freeze your hands when they are needed." She reached over and flipped a switch on the side wall. The projector clicked off. The room dimmed a shade without the glow. In the brief quiet that followed, she could hear the soft breaths of the people in front of her, that living chorus of lungs and hearts. "Listen to that," she said. "This is what you work for. Not the chart, not the report, not your evaluation. This sound." She stepped back from the podium. "We start with airway," she said. "Open your manuals, page 1. Chairs scraped as they obeyed. Pages rustled. Pens clicked. The normal small sounds of a class beginning rose and settled. Later, when the day's training was done and the students had filed out, the base grew quieter. The sun sank lower, taking some of the heat with it. The runway lights blinked on small pools of brightness in the growing dusk. Lena stood at the edge of the tarmac, just beyond the reach of those lights. The air smelled faintly of fuel and distant sea. The sky above her was a deepening blue, scattered with early stars. She reached inside her jacket and touched the place where the patch lay, fingers pressing through fabric to the familiar shape. The stitches that held it there were small and tight. Somewhere far off, a helicopter lifted into the sky, its rotors a distant thrum. This time the sound did not twist her stomach. It rolled over the base and faded, leaving a quiet that felt earned. She looked out over the runway, then up at the fading line of daylight on the horizon. "I am here," she said softly to no one in particular, and to everyone who might need it. "We are not done." Her hand fell back to her side. The light on the runway pulsed in a slow rhythm. The base around her breathed. "Thank you so much for listening to today's story. If this story resonated with you or made you reflect, I'd love to hear your thoughts, so feel free to share them in the comments below. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you won't miss the next story. I'll see you next time as we continue exploring more journeys and lessons together.